today, he said he may have to go to an executive order to stop the moratorium, to reverse the moratorium and promote drilling. I mean, once again, I just wonder, you had the Fed statement directed at inflation last week. You have the president talking up the dollar, talking up drilling. You have Treasury man Paulson talking up the dollar. We're all waiting for the Fed to pull the trigger to take back a rate cut, Dennis, but maybe this is all closer to a turning point than we think. Maybe stocks are too gloomy right now. I guess that's where I'm going.
I'll tell you what, if the president would call him, say to the country, I'm going to go and speak and explain to the people why we need to drill, where we need to drill, how good we are capable of drilling these days, how much safer drilling is, and how important it would be, that would be a wonderful thing that he would do. I'm not sure he'll do it. I wish that he would. All
right. Well, no one can be sure. Gary Schilling will come to you. I know you're a recession bear and a deflationist. I want to put up a chart. The CRB Futures Index, which is everything. It includes gold and oil and industrials and grains and whatever, soybeans and all that. I've never seen a soybean. Now, CRB Futures has had a heck of a run. This year it's up almost 30%. Since 2002 it's up almost 100%. It's very interesting. Look at the takeoff in that thing there at the far right part of the chart. In other words, in the last year or so, it's had a phenomenal takeoff. Gary Schilling, you're a housing deflationist, recessionist bear. The CRB says global growth is booming. How do you reconcile the two?
I think there is a fair amount of speculation in commodities markets. You've had many institutions and individuals who now believe it's an asset class. They put a lot of money in there. They think it's the same as stocks and bonds. And you also have had strong global demand, a lot of it in Asia, but I think that's derived directly and indirectly from U.S. consumers. In other words, it's U.S. consumers buying those exports that consume all this energy. As the U.S. consumer goes in the tank, and after the meager spending on the rebates, and by the way, we estimate that with the consumption numbers for May that were just released, that consumers spent only 4% of the tax rebates they received then. They spend a little bit more in June, that's it. Consumers retrench. Their home equity is disappearing fast. Their credit cards are maxed out.
But even though...
Then I think we're going to get the retrenchment, and that'll affect...
Even though, you're going to get a solid second quarter on consumer spending. That's what the numbers show. Consumer spending is going to be up at least 2.5%, adjusted for inflation. And I'm so interested... yes, the May number, whether the rebates are in there or not, but April and March were revised higher on the overall figure for personal consumption, just as they were revised higher for retailers. And I just have to wonder, Gary, are you misjudging the tenor and the tone? Maybe there was a bottom and a turning point. We saw better capital goods numbers coming out. Chicago today, we got a chart. It ain't much, but the Purchasing Managers Index from Chicago, the last 2 months have been up slightly. Maybe there's a...
Well, no, wait a minute. No, it still shows a decline. It's below 50%. And consumer
sentiment is...
That's
not consistent with recession. That's not a recessionary number. Yeah, you need to get a lot lower before you're looking at recessionary numbers for the Chicago PMI.
Well, but the point is that this recession is coming in stages. We've seen the first two, housing and Wall Street, continuing the tubes. It's the third phase. It's the consumer retrenching that I think is next, and that's what, in my view, will occupy the second half of this year.
Why haven't they retrenched yet? I mean, basically, during
Why haven't they? Because they still had credit cards to borrow on. They still had the ability to spend, and the American consumer will keep spending as long as they have any money to borrow, but they now have run out.
All right, the housing price declines were much faster, much more rapid last year than they were this year.
Oh, sure, but there was a lot of borrowing, home equity loans and so on that were in the pipelines, the credit cards, student loans, the borrowing that people have done in other forms.
All right, then let's talk about credit cards. The credit card default rate is nowhere near as high as it was during the actual recession in 2001.
It's
rising a little bit.
And auto loans, if you look at auto loan defaults, particularly loans made from dealers, they are skyrocketing.
All right,
they're still not as high as during the last recession.
We've just written this up for our July report, our insight report, and these things are really serious, and this is Wall Street's next problem.
They're not at recessionary levels.
Right,
beyond subprime, it's going to move to autos and credit cards, these other securitizations.
We're not going to solve that, but let me go to Andy Bush. Andy, here's interesting. You follow these international markets closely. President Bush made an interesting statement today. He said, in his view, the European banks had not yet made the balance sheet adjustments and the loan loss adjustments that the American banks made. And I was surprised. That's a very interesting point. And he's thought that that was a reason why our economy had greater value at this moment and our dollar has greater value than theirs. He says they're way behind us. What's your take on that thought from President Bush? You know, he is a Harvard MBA. He knows a lot about the economy. I think people underestimate Bush as much as they underestimate the dollar.
Well, two things with this. First of all, with the ECB raising rates, it's going to flatten their yield curve, so it's going to hurt them, obviously, the bank's ability to make money. But secondly, you know, going back to when I first started appearing on your program back in the fall, you know, we looked at the U.S. markets and the U.S. banks coming out and being more aggressive with the write-downs, coming out more aggressive with the mea culpas, as opposed to some of the Swiss banks that we knew when they were releasing their rates, it just didn't, or releasing their loan losses, it just didn't feel like those numbers were right, like they weren't coming forward with what they were talking about as what their losses were. And I think that's what President Bush is talking about. We're the clearest market as far as financial numbers. You know, granted, maybe there's a lot of problems, but we're way better than what Europe is, Japan, China, you name it.
Yeah, so
those places are opaque compared to us, so we're so much better. You can trust our numbers. The banks over there, I don't think have taken the hit. I think they're still, I mean, all the things we're seeing from UBS and, and so on, that's the problem.
All right, but that may be, if you look at, you know, we are now in close to bear market territory from the peak last October. Our markets are basically down about 19%. But I notice, and let me go to Dennis on this. Dennis, the Europeans are much worse. They're down 25%. Asia's down 22%. Japan is down 21%. And, of course, Gary Schilling's most detested Shanghai index is off 52%, Dennis.
I love it. I love it.
I mean, Dennis, maybe President Bush has a point. Maybe Andy Bush. Maybe we've taken the hit first because our banks, you know, they just stepped up to the plate. Now that we've taken that hit in the stock market and particularly in the financials, maybe it's time to give them a second look. Maybe the next bunch of hits is going to be coming from Europe. Well, maybe that's why the dollar is cheap.
I think Andy's absolutely right, and I think your point is one well made. We are so much more transparent than everybody else is. People on the street may say this group's numbers can't be trusted, that group's number can't be trusted. But compared to the numbers that come out of Europe, compared to the numbers that come out of China, our numbers are angelic in nature.
That's why.
And that really does tend to wear rather decidedly upon those our companies first. A year from now, I guess the trade will be to own American banks and be short of European banks.
See, it wasn't my point. I want to give credit where credit is due. I did not think of this. I did not have the wherewithal. I did not have the intellect today on Monday morning. It was President Bush who made this point.
Well, I think it's a very valid point.
And what I was just going to say, Larry, remember, with Sarbanes-Oxley, CEOs and people have to sign off on the financial statements.
Or you go to jail.
They have to sign their name, and so they have to be forthcoming. If you have an event happening, you have to let your investors know about it, and I think that's why U.S. banks have been at the forefront of saying, you know, we got problems.
Are you suggesting that Sarbanes-Oxley had some good qualities and merits to it?
I would say that getting better information to investors faster is always important and better for the financial system.
All right, hang on. We have much more work to do. Our panel's going to be